Seriously? Let's talk about that. Imagine your local representative. You know, the one who sends you those glossy leaflets. Now imagine them there forever. Still smiling that slightly forced smile? Or is that a nervous twitch developing on your own face? This isn't some wild dystopian fantasy for many places, folks. Politicians can, and absolutely do, stick around in their comfy chairs. For decades. They become like that one relative who shows up for Thanksgiving and still on your couch in March. But with significantly more power, and tragically, less contribution to the leftover pie. Why should you, yes specifically, the person currently wondering if you left the iron on, care about this? Because these aren't just abstract jobs we're talking about. These are the people making critical decisions that directly impact your life, your healthcare access, the quality of your kids' schools, your fundamental ability to afford a cup of coffee that doesn't taste like disappointment. When one individual clings to power for an excessive amount of time, who are they truly listening to? Is it you, the constituent? Or is it the legion of powerful friends and lobbyists they've accumulated over all those years? Think about it. Really let that marinate. This isn't some brand new trendy complaint that just popped up like artisanal pickleball paddles. Though unlike the fleeting allure of artisanal pickleball paddles, this particular problem doesn't seem to be fading away anytime soon. People have been deeply wary of unchecked concentrated power since power was first invented. Probably by some enterprising caveman who figured out how to hog all the good throwable rocks. The ancient Greeks discussed it at length. The Romans definitely and rather dramatically experienced its downsides. It's a classic political problem. Like a terrible horror movie that just keeps getting remade, each time with slightly worse special effects. So, what's the actual alternative to this pervasive politician for life syndrome? Is there a magic pill we can develop? A secret handshake that ushers them out the door? Not quite that simple, unfortunately. But there is an idea, a rather sensible concept in fact, something called term limits. It's a straightforward tool when you get down to it. But it could be the very key we need to keeping our political systems fresh and responsive, to keeping those elected officials on their toes, and most importantly, to making absolutely sure they remember who they're actually supposed to be working for. Us, hopefully. We live in hope. Okay, let's dive into term limits. What exactly are they? Simply put, they are rules. Clear, unambiguous rules that stipulate a politician can only hold a specific elected office for a certain, predetermined amount of time. That is the core of it. No complicated ifs, ands, or buts about it. You serve your X number of years, or your Y number of terms in office. Then, it's a hearty thank you very much for your service. Now please exit stage left. It's basically like a library book system for politicians. You get to enjoy it, learn from it. But eventually, you absolutely have to return it, so someone else can have a read. And please, don't think these are some wacky out-there idea cooked up in a political science fiction novel, perhaps involving space gerrymandering. Not at all. Lots of highly functional countries around the globe use them quite effectively. The President of the United States, for instance? Yep, a maximum of 2 terms. That's the deal. We can mostly thank George Washington for setting that precedent, bless his wooden teeth. How about Mexico? Their presidents get 1 single 6-year term. Then, adios amigo. Even sophisticated places like France have presidential term limits. It's a genuinely global phenomenon, because apparently nobody really likes a power hog, regardless of the language they hog power in. Why did these various countries even bother to implement such rules? Were they just suffering from collective boredom on a legislative Tuesday? Highly unlikely. They put these limits in place for very sound, very important reasons. Primarily, to prevent the rise of dictatorships or autocracies, for one. That's a pretty biggie on the good reasons list. To stop one individual, or indeed one political party, from clinging desperately onto power indefinitely, like a limpet on a rock. It's all about ensuring a regular, healthy refresh of the system, a guaranteed chance for new faces, and crucially, new ideas, and perhaps most importantly, to remind everyone involved that legitimate political power comes from the people, not from permanently squatting in an office chair until it molds to your form. But here's the kicker. Not every country has them, or has them for all important positions. Some nations have term limits that are, shall we say, rather weak and full of loopholes. Or sometimes politicians, being the crafty creatures they often are, find clever little ways around them. Oh, I can't be president again. Fine, I'll just become the all-powerful prime minister instead. Sneaky. And in some governmental systems, particularly parliamentary ones, The Prime Minister can often stay in power for as long as their party keeps winning elections, which, as history shows, can be a very, very long time indeed. Leading to, well, we'll get to the potential consequences of that. It's not always a pretty picture, folks. So, are term limits the absolute best thing since sliced bread? Perhaps even better than bread that comes pre-buttered? Or are they a truly terrible idea, akin to, say, unsliced bread that you have to gnaw through with your bare teeth during an important meeting? As with most things in politics, people disagree. Passionately. Shocking, I know. On one side of this great debate, you have the enthusiastic, yes please, and can we have more, crowd. They argue, quite persuasively, that term limits are essential to protect democracy itself. They stop politicians from slowly morphing into mini-kings or queens of their own little fiefdoms. They actively force change, and they give a wider range of people a genuine shot at running the show. Which, on the face of it, sounds pretty fair, right? Think about it for a moment. New people in office invariably bring new energy. They bring fresh perspectives unclouded by years of insider baseball. They haven't spent multiple decades trapped in the same echo chamber, listening only to the dulcet tones of the same lobbyists and power brokers. They might actually remember what it's like to try and fill out one of those ridiculously complicated government forms, or endure the soul-crushing experience of waiting in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles. This injection of fresh blood can powerfully challenge old, stale, and often ineffective ways of thinking. And maybe, just maybe, they might come up with innovative solutions that aren't simply more of the exact same thing we tried last time, but louder. That's the hope anyway. The beautiful, optimistic hope. But then, inevitably, there's the other side. The hold on just a darn minute there, buddy brigade. They contend, often quite forcefully, that experience in politics truly matters. A great deal, in fact. You wouldn't want a completely rookie surgeon attempting to operate on your brain after watching a few YouTube tutorials, would you? Of course not. So why, they ask, would you want to forcibly kick out a skilled, experienced politician who genuinely knows how the levers of government work? They argue that it's fundamentally anti-democratic to tell voters they choose someone simply because that person has been around for a while. Let the people decide who they want. They cry. Even if the people, for some reason, consistently want grandpa politics back in office again. And to be fair, there's a legitimate point to be made there. What if a truly great, effective leader is forced out of office prematurely by an arbitrary term limit? Someone who is popular, demonstrably competent, and actually doing a fantastic job for their constituents. Is it truly smart governance to lose all that accumulated experience, all that valuable institutional know-how, just because a clock runs out? It's a bit like your favorite television show suddenly ending on a massive cliffhanger because the main actor unexpectedly hit their contractual limit. Deeply frustrating. So, it's a genuine dilemma, this one. A real political head-scratcher with no easy answers. Who, in this particular squabble, is actually right? Now let's talk frankly about what often happens when politicians overstay their welcome by a significant margin. It's rarely a pretty sight. Experience, as we've discussed, can be a valuable asset. Entrenchment, however, is an entirely different and far more dangerous beast. When someone remains cemented in a position of power for far too long, the risk of corruption, both petty and grand, goes way, way up. Suddenly, doing special favors for longtime friends and generous donors doesn't seem so ethically murky. The established rules start to bend, then warp, then almost disappear. Accountability? Oh, that's just a charming concept for the little people to worry about. It's a slow, insidious creep, but it happens with depressing regularity. Power, as the old saying goes, corrupts. And absolute power, well, it absolutely makes you an insufferable nightmare to be around. And it's not just about the straightforward, blatant stealing of public money, though that is, of course, objectively terrible and should be prosecuted. It's also about the insidious nature of power hoarding. These long-term incumbents meticulously build their little personal empires within the system. They surround themselves with sycophantic yes-men and yes-women, terrified of offering any genuine criticism. They gradually, then completely, stop listening to the actual concerns of their voters. Because, frankly, why should they bother? They've been winning elections for decades, often unopposed. They become profoundly out of touch, genuinely thinking that a pint of milk still costs what it did back in 1982. New ideas? Fresh approaches? Forget about it. They're far too busy fiercely protecting their own turf, their own precious, unshakable status. We've all seen the headlines, or at least we can easily imagine them, can't we? Senator Throckmorton P. Snugglesworth in office since dinosaurs roamed the earth, vigorously votes against funding high-speed internet for rural areas. Or perhaps Mayor McLifetime unanimously blocks crucial funding for a new children's park, simultaneously approves a third glorious statue of himself in the town square. These aren't just silly jokes, folks. When there's no natural end point to their tenure, no built-in incentive to groom capable successors or to genuinely respond to the changing needs and times, things inevitably stagnate. The political arteries of the nation get clogged with old, tired cholesterol, and democracy itself starts to feel a bit, well, constipated, which, as anyone who's experienced it knows, is a truly terrible and uncomfortable feeling. So the big question remains, should term limits be implemented everywhere, for almost every significant elected office? My answer, if you haven't guessed it already, is a resounding, deafening, RuPaul-style yes, queen, work it democracy. Look, no system of governance is ever going to be absolutely perfect. That's a fantasy. But a functioning democracy desperately needs robust safeguards. It needs constant refreshment and renewal. Term limits are a vital, practical tool to help fight insidious corruption, to actively encourage new voices and diverse perspectives, to ensure, above all, that politicians clearly remember they are public, not permanent, hereditary rulers. It's about keeping the entire system healthy and responsive. And frankly, it's about damn time we took it seriously. It really, truly is.